Dairy Dreams, and in the spring of 2002, we started milking our first cows. Originally, we started with 1,200 cows and are currently milking 2,950 today. Dairy Dreams is one part of the Pagel family businesses. The Pagel family businesses combined milks around 11,000 cows at 5 sites. We have 3 sites that raise our calves and our heifers. We have a cheese plant on one of our dairies at Pagels Ponderosa that makes delicious cheese that is sold at our retail store, Ron's Wisconsin Cheese, in nearby Luxembourg, Wisconsin. Our family's mission is growing together for a better tomorrow. The dream is being able to develop and grow a business that creates opportunities for the next generation to succeed. Sustainability is something we've been talking and working on for quite some time. Doing the best we can to create the best environment for our people, for our cows, for our community, while being the best stewards of the land and producing the world's most healthiest and wholesome dairy products. When we first learned about the FPEP, or the Fertilizer Production Expansion Program, we were very excited to see that USDA was investing in these types of programs. We've been looking at doing a nutrient concentration system for over 10 years, trying to figure out what is best for our environment, for our farms, along with it being affordable for our dairies. Being in northern Kewaunee County, we have karst soils, and karst soils means that we have 2 feet or less of soil depth to bedrock. On that land, we have to apply a chemical fertilizer. We're not able to put fertilizer on there. With this new system, we will have 3 products: a phosphorus fertilizer product, a nitrogen fertilizer product, and clean dischargeable water. Our goal is to create an organic fertilizer that we can apply not only to our ground, but able to make it available for other farmers also, and create another possible revenue stream for our dairies. This will allow us to apply to the nutrient need of the crop, making us more efficient and keeping more trucks off of the road. Being able to use recycled water, we will be able to use it to reuse to cool our cows, use for our wash systems and our flush systems within our barns. We can use for mixing water for our chemicals for our sprayer, and we can also use water to clean our equipment. All these things we can use water for, reuse the water for without having to pull water for our wells. Getting the FPAC grant will help us continue to set up the next generation for success, creating a more sustainable environment, and strengthen our family business for the future. We're very excited about the possibilities with this new technology that would not have been possible without this grant. We just want to say thank you again to the USDA for understanding the importance of making these investments. We'd like to thank our community and our local members, our family and our farms for giving us the support to endure such an operation and take the leap into putting in a nutrient concentration system just as we've had. And again, we'd like to thank you all for coming today. We look forward to exchanging ideas and our roundtable discussions. With that being said, I'd like to introduce Secretary Dakat Romansky to come up and take the podium.
Thank you for the introduction, JJ. Thanks for hosting this conversation today. Thanks for the demonstration you gave us ahead of time. It'll all the dots will be connected once we kind of hear a little bit more about the really innovative work that's being done here. And thanks to all of you for being here, for being part of this discussion. A good opportunity to listen and learn from each other. At the Wisconsin Department of Ag, Trade, and Consumer Protection, we pretty consistently say we're a resource. We're a resource to farmers. We're a resource to businesses. And we are a resource to our partners at governmental levels, federal, state, local. And so our partnership is strong with the U.S. Department of Agriculture. We appreciate Secretary Vilsack's leadership on so many programs. We're here to talk about conservation innovation programs today as part of how our dairy industry here in Wisconsin can continue to lead the way on innovation. But there are so many ways that we work in partnership with our federal partners, and it would be, I don't have enough time to list it because you don't want to just sit here and listen to me today. But everything from local food purchasing, so that we are helping farmers find ways to support local connections to food, to building resiliency in food systems, whether it's innovations for meat processors to try and help them be more efficient, or other ways to support the middle of the food supply chain, which is important to all of us because we all eat. But it's especially important in a state like Wisconsin, where we grow, produce, and process so much food that feeds not only our neighbors here, but people around the world. And those challenges of food insecurity are real. We need to continually produce more food for more people around the world, and those connections are important. A couple things that struck me when we were listening to JJ and the team talk about some of the innovations that are being done here and have been done by this operation, by this family over the years. Innovation and adapting. You know, focusing on the ways to innovate and add value to products, do things more sustainably, which is a word that we hear a lot. And that vision, that sustainability is important, whether we're talking about that product that's going locally because consumers here want to know about it, or whether it's products that make their way around the world. And again, we are really fortunate to have the support from USDA, and JJ talked about the FPEP grant. A lot of times that means economic resources that states and businesses may not have on their own. It's an important part of the process, and we're fortunate to have that. Wisconsin's America's dairy land, and we know that agriculture, dairy, and farmers should be and are part of climate and energy solutions. After all, farmers are stewards of land and water. I hear this a lot from farmers, and we kind of heard this mantra today too, and that's we take care of the land and water because the land and water takes care of us. That's the way farmers approach things, and there are so many systems being put in place here that kind of epitomize that. So we're really proud to be here with you today. I do appreciate Secretary Vilsack's team at USDA continuing to partner with Wisconsin on so many issues. It's through this partnership that we're able to communicate the needs of the industry, the growth potential of certain markets, and to support the hard work of farmers. So again, thank you, Secretary Vilsack, for your support. Before he comes up here, I would like to give a brief introduction of Secretary Vilsack. United States Secretary of Agriculture Tom Vilsack was confirmed as the 32nd United States Secretary of Agriculture after being nominated by President Joe Biden to return to a role he served for 8 years under President Barack Obama, the longest-serving member of President Obama's original cabinet. Prior to his appointment, he served 2 terms as the governor of Iowa, served in the Iowa State Senate, and as mayor of Mount Pleasant, Iowa. Under Secretary Vilsack's leadership, the U.S. Department of Agriculture is building back better by restoring the American economy, strengthening rural and historical underserved communities, responding to threats of climate change, creating good-paying jobs for American workers and the next generation of agricultural leaders, and investing in our kids and families. So with that, I'm happy to turn it over to Secretary Tom Vilsack.
So, Secretary, thank you very much, and it's great to be in Wisconsin, and to the Pagel family, thank you for giving us this opportunity to learn a little bit about your operation and the history of this operation. Started as a relatively small dairy operation and farming operation in 1948, and has grown over the course of a number of generations with a number of visionary leaders. And so really appreciate the opportunity to be here. And certainly appreciate all of the folks who are on the panel today. Going to learn a lot from you, I'm sure, and I'm looking forward to learning about some of the opportunities and the challenges that you faced, and how we at USDA might be more helpful in the future. And a big thank you to all of you who are here today to visit with us. I am just incredibly excited to be here. Because I don't know that I've been secretary for a while. I've been to a lot of farming operations. I've seen a lot of different and diverse approaches to agriculture. But I can say unequivocally, I have never seen the totality of opportunity as I've seen with this farming operation. I'm going to go to this whiteboard here in just a few minutes, and you're going to see that the Pagel family has basically understood the framework of what I think is the new future for agriculture. And it's really exciting to see it. And it's exciting to see it in a way that supports multiple families, keeping the farm, expanding the farm, and living the dream. Not only their dream, but also their father's dream and vision. So this is an aptly, appropriately named place, Dairy Dreams. You all have done that, and it's an amazing opportunity. The Secretary mentioned and the fertilizer expansion program. Look, when Russia invaded Ukraine, it created quite a bit of confusion in the fertilizer market. And as a result, farmers across the country saw significant increases in fertilizer costs. The President came to me and said there needs to be something done for these folks. We've got to help them. And originally we proposed a $250 million program designed to provide assistance and help to families like this one, to figure out ways in which they could potentially either expand the production of our own fertilizer here in the U.S., perhaps create alternatives to fertilizer that would be effective, or even create the capacity of farmers to better understand the nature of their land so that they would potentially not have to fertilize as much. There are some corn acres, for example, in the Midwest where scientists at Iowa State University have suggested that maybe as much as a third of those acres don't require any fertilizer at all. So with proper sensor technology, you can apply fertilizer strategically and thoughtfully. So we launched this $250 million program. I happened to travel with the President to Illinois to a soybean farming operation down there. And while we were there, there was a conversation by the farmer to the President about the necessity of continuing to support fertilizer production. That then prompted the President to turn to me and said, double the program, Mr. Secretary, from $250 million to $500 million. And we eventually added an additional $400 million to the program. So this is a $900 million effort. And today we're expanding on the number of announcements we've previously made. We began accepting applications in September of 2022, and we received over 350 applications for $3 billion of requests. So obviously, we aren't going to be able to respond to all 350 applications. 47 states are involved in these applications. And so today we're announcing an additional 17 projects that will be funded from 12 states with an additional $83 million. I'll just give you one example. There's a facility in California that's going to use insects to recycle food waste into an organic nutrient fertilizer that will be used by specialty crop producers in California. So it expands that opportunity. So an additional 12 states receiving assistance in 17 projects. That brings to a total of $251 million that we've invested in 57 projects, including here at Dairy Dreams, across 29 states. The folks here received a grant from us. DeLong Company also received a grant from USDA to quadruple their processing capacity for fertilizer. And we also provided an additional grant to Blacks Valley Ag Supply in Durand, Wisconsin, to create dry fertilizer. So it's an opportunity for us to invest nearly $12 million in total here in the state to expand access to fertilizer. We're going to continue to do this. I would expect and anticipate over the course of the next several months we'll probably make perhaps as many as an additional 30 to 40 announcements in this fertilizer program. And we're going to see literally tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of tons of additional fertilizer being made available here in the U.S., lowering costs for farmers, expanding supply, and providing alternative ways to deal with the high cost of fertilizer. So we're excited about that. And I appreciate the next 15 minutes of your time, because I want to explain to you where things are with reference to agriculture, the concerns that I have as Secretary as we now see the conversation and discussion about a farm bill and things of that nature. What's the direction of agriculture in this country? What does it need to be? Where is it headed, and where should it be headed? And you'll see this whiteboard here, and I'll make reference to it periodically during the course of my remarks today. But a couple of statistics that people have to understand. I have on my desk in Washington, D.C., a volume that was produced in 1863, which was the first year of the Department of Agriculture's existence. And then the Commissioner of Agriculture, a fellow by the name of Isaac Newton, not the famous Isaac Newton, the other Isaac Newton. He was the Commissioner of Agriculture, and he issued a report to Abraham Lincoln about the activities of the department. And it was a 362-page document that he provided to the President. And he had a preamble to that report in which he talked about heavy concentration of land and his concern in the U.S. That if we had heavy concentrations of land ownership, we would essentially see the same fate that it was experienced in the Roman Empire. He was of the opinion that if we lost the ability to have small, mid-sized, and large-scale farming operations, a diversified farming landscape, that it would eventually impact and affect our democracy and eventually impact and affect our country. Now, that was in 1863. In 1991, I was practicing law in the neighboring state of Iowa, in a small town in southeast Iowa. We were going through a really tough time in agriculture. For those of us who were around then, you remember the foreclosures and the difficulties that were experienced then. And I was representing farmers during those foreclosures, and it was a very difficult time. At that time, the Secretary of Agriculture was Bob Berglund, and Bob was leaving. He was Minnesotan, was leaving office, and he issued a report in which he raised the same concerns that Isaac Newton had raised in 1863. He said, you know, we changed the system of supporting farmers from a supply management system in the Depression era to a more market orientation. And he was concerned that this might have an impact, a negative impact on farm families and on rural communities. He was right. It has had an impact. If you look at the number of farms that were in existence in the U.S. in 1981 when he issued that report and compare it to the number of farms today, what you would find is that we have lost 544,970 farms that were in existence in 1981 that aren't in existence today. Now, to give you a sense of how many farms that is, that would be every farmer today in the following states: North Dakota and South Dakota, every farmer as well in Minnesota and Wisconsin, added to those in Illinois and Iowa, together with those in Nebraska and Colorado, and those in Missouri and Oklahoma. It's a lot of farms that are no longer farming today. In addition to losing farm families and its impact on small communities, we've also lost over that same period of time, since 1981, 151 million acres of land that was in farming that isn't in farming today. It's land that has been expanded in growing cities and suburbs. It's not in the farming business today. That is the land mass equal to the land mass of the states of Florida, Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, Maryland, and most of Virginia. So the question that I think any Secretary of Agriculture should be asking rural America and all of America is, are we okay with that? Are we okay with that? If we are, then what Secretary Perdue said in 2019 in this very state in Wisconsin would remain true, which is, in agriculture, you've got to get big or you're going to get out. I think there's a better way, and the President has challenged us to think a better way, and I think we're on a farm that explains exactly what that better way consists of. I think there's an entrepreneurial option, a way not to necessarily get big or get out, but to get diversified. And so I'd like to spend just a few minutes of your time talking about the investments we are making in that new model so that it complements, it's not contrary to, but it complements production agriculture, which we'll continue to need. We're going to continue to need to feed the world and feed ourselves. But the question is whether or not we are smart enough and innovative enough to create an additional model for those who want to be small or mid-sized and would like to remain in farming. 88% of farm families today in America require off-farm income to be able to maintain and keep the farm. So the question that I pose and the challenge that I pose to all of us is, why is it that the farm family has to work multiple jobs? Why can't the farm itself generate multiple sources of income? And so we've gone about the last 3 years trying to create a system that would create the opportunity for additional revenue sources and better revenue sources for farm families across America, regardless of size. And that brings me to the whiteboard. And I'm going to go through this relatively quickly because I want to hear from the panelists, but I want to give you a sense of what we are doing and what we have invested. So I'll bring this over. Take this out. So it starts, as JJ indicated, with farmers' commitment to being sustainable. And so we suggested and decided to utilize resources from the Commodity Credit Corporation to establish a fund of $3 billion. And we asked farmers what they would do with that resource to embrace sustainable practices. And this farm family is one of the families that stepped up. They said make it voluntary, make it incentive-driven, help pay for the practices that you want to encourage, and create a market opportunity where we might receive a premium for whatever it is we are producing through sustainable practices. So that's exactly what we've done. We have currently today 136 out of 141 contracts that we've signed that are implementing. Thousands of farmers, millions of acres now engaged in this. In the state of Wisconsin, 27 projects available to farmers covering 44 commodities that are grown in this state, and encouraging and paying farmers to do 118 separate climate-smart practices, everything from cover crops and rotational grazing and things of that nature, nutrient management. So we're paying farmers to conduct climate-smart agriculture practices. And then we are working with markets to create a value-added proposition for whatever it is the climate-smart crop or commodity produces. Last month, I was in, I think it was in Missouri, where we were talking about a new rice product that was produced in Louisiana and Arkansas. It was produced with 1/2 less water and 1/2 less methane than traditional rice production. Columbia Brand, which is a company that sells rice on the commercial market, is paying a premium to those farmers to embrace these climate practices, and is also paying the farmer an additional price above and beyond the traditional rice price for that. They purchased 50 million pounds of it to commercialize. So it's the first commercial product that we've had from these 136. So this is a new value-added opportunity that didn't exist but does today, and is funded for the next 3 to 5 years. We're going to measure, monitor, report, and verify the results. You know, what folks like the Pagel family, they will be able to tell you at some point in time, by virtue of everything they're doing, that their dairy operation is operating at X% greenhouse gas reduction, X% of carbon sequestration, whatever it might be, and they might be able to say we're operating at a net zero or maybe even a negative carbon footprint, because they're going to be able to measure, monitor, and verify the impacts of all the things they're doing on this farm. Now, when you can measure, monitor, and report and verify something, you can sell it. That creates the opportunity for this family and families like them across the country to be able to go to ecosystem service markets. These are industries, these are foundations, these are organizations that will pay for the very results these people are able to obtain by essentially recycling their manure. They will pay this family and families across the country for the environmental results that only farmers can produce. Because if you're talking about sequestering carbon, you need to have land, and farmers are the ones who have the land. That's where the carbon can be stored. This is a new income source that hasn't existed, that will exist over the course of time. This is a family that understands the necessity and the opportunity that waste product creates. Not only does it create the opportunity to fertilize your field, but if you're smart about it, it can create a series of bioproducts. And so what we're doing with Climate Smart Agriculture is there are a number of projects in which we are transitioning agricultural waste into new products, products that either didn't exist or allowing farmers to reduce the cost of their operation. In this case, the family is using it for fertilizer. They're going to be able to eventually be able to sell some of that organic fertilizer to those who need it. And they mentioned the future opportunities that may be created with pelletizing the fertilizer that they don't need for their own operation. They can also potentially work, as many are, to convert that into things like sustainable aviation fuel. This is a 36 billion gallon industry that does not exist today, but will exist over the next 5 to 10 years. If you do the math, ethanol is 15 billion, biofuels sustainable aviation fuels 36 billion. It's a twofold increase in that business. That's a business that currently supports 400,000 jobs. So we're talking nearly 1 million additional jobs in rural places, and the opportunity to create a new commodity through agricultural waste that creates a new income source for farmers. There's also a huge opportunity with a tax credit to produce this sustainable aviation fuel, and we've recently begun the process of making sure that sustainable agricultural practices will qualify for that tax credit. So tremendous opportunity here. This family is poised to take advantage of this, poised to take advantage of this. Now, the one thing that they haven't taken advantage of, but they probably will now that they've had a conversation with me today, is renewable energy. There's an opportunity through the Renewable Energy for America program to receive grants or loans from the Department of Agriculture to install a solar system, a wind system, a biodigester, a geothermal system to be able to reduce your costs of electricity and power that operates your facility. But the reality is farmers can produce more than they need on their farm. And we're working with RECs and municipal utilities under a program called PACE, P-A-C-E, and New Era. We're going to give these companies $10.7 billion to assist them in transitioning from a energy production portfolio based on fossil fuels to one that is based on more bio and renewable fuels. So now farmers can essentially aggregate excess energy that they produce on the farm. Their costs are down for themselves, but now they can then sell that to the REC. That becomes a new commodity for the farmer, a new source of income, and it also helps to lower the cost to all of the customers of that REC. This is a new income source that hasn't existed, that will exist. So all of this is in the climate smart area, a value-added opportunity and lower costs, a new income source with credits, a new income source with new commodities being transitioned from waste into something more valuable, and renewable energy creating new opportunities for a new commodity as well. So instead of just simply selling a commodity, you now have 1, 2, 3, 4 opportunities. Now, in addition to this, you also have the local and regional food system opportunity. Now, why is it that this farm family is producing cheese? Well, there are a couple of reasons. One, they're in Wisconsin, and I guess that's like a birthright. You have to produce cheese in Wisconsin. I got that. 2, they're doing it because they recognize it's a value-added proposition. They recognize this, that when their milk gets turned into cheese by somebody else, they might get 20 cents of every food dollar. That's basically what a farmer gets. Every time you go to the grocery store, you slap a buck on the counter for your groceries. Ask yourself, how much does a farmer get from that product that just went through the scanner? About 20 cents on average. And some years it's 15 cents, some years it's 22 cents, but just 20 cents. Ask yourself, who gets the other 80 cents? It's the people who do the fancy boxes, you know, with the beautiful artwork on them that you can't figure out whether you're buying the regular Triscuits or different types of Triscuits. It's those people. It's the people that package. It's the people who truck. It's the people who process. It's the people who stock, who essentially retail. It's all those people in the supply chain. They get a piece of that 80 cents. Farmer gets 20 cents. But when this family sells their cheese, they're going to get a higher percentage because there aren't the middlemen. They're the ones processing. They're the ones packaging. So at the end of the day, they don't get 20 cents. They may get 50 cents or 75 cents. So we invested and have invested resources in processing of meat and poultry, as well as we've provided the Secretary of Agriculture resources to help processing here for non-meat and poultry processing, as well as cold storage and warehousing opportunities and grants. We've created, as he mentioned, the local food purchasing opportunities where we're trying to create that local supply chain so that what's being produced here in Wisconsin can be sold here in Wisconsin, so farmers get a better bang for the buck. And all told, between processing, about $1 billion in Wisconsin, we funded 15 projects, investing about $24 million in processing here just in Wisconsin. We've invested in about $29 million in local and regional food systems and in procurement. And of course, I mentioned the fact that we're all engaged in fertilizer. So we've invested in every single one of these here in Wisconsin on the REAP program. We've done 196 projects at farmers across the state of Wisconsin, about $10 billion, $20 million in renewable energy projects. So we've invested in Wisconsin in every single one of these boxes. And this family has invested in virtually every single one of these boxes. So let me just finish with this. Why is this important? I think it's important because there are two conversations that can take place on a family farm like this one. There's a conversation where the parents or the grandparents bring the kids and the grandkids in and essentially say, as far too often has been the case since 1981, we just can't quite figure out how to make it. And we're going to have to sell. And here's what I know about the farmers that are in this audience. When I ask you what you do, and you tell me you're a farmer, that tells me not just what you do, it tells me who you are. I don't know there's another occupation if that's true. You ask me what I do, I tell you I'm a lawyer, it tells you what I do. It doesn't necessarily tell you who I am. I know that farmers are rooted to land, and the last thing they want to do is to have that conversation. They would prefer to have the conversation in which they say, you know, with a little bit of entrepreneurship and a little bit of help, maybe we can create multiple streams of revenue that will support multiple families. And it seems to me that this country is smart enough and wealthy enough and innovative enough and creative enough to be able to create a system like this. Farmers and farm families have options. That it's not just get big or get out. It's actually, we can make it. Now, what's the benefit to the country when you do that? Well, here's the benefit. The benefit is that we don't lose that farmland to concrete. We have small communities that are thriving, small communities that can support their local school, their local businesses owned by local folks. It's not just a dollar store and a Walmart. They can have a hospital, enough people to support a doc, and their kids have the opportunity to stay and raise their families in a place that they love and are connected to. The country benefits because when we have more of those small towns thriving, and we have more of those farm families being able to continue to do what they love to do, we have more young men and women who are willing to serve in the military. A disproportionate number of those who serve the military come from these small rural communities. And they do it because they learn something very specific from the people who have lived here and who raise crops here and raise livestock here. There's not a single farmer that I know that doesn't understand this. you've got to give back to that which gives to you. You got to give back to the land, don't you? Because if you stop giving to it, it's going to stop giving to you. It's going to be less productive over time. So you replenish it, you renourish it. When kids understand that principle, they look at this country and they go, you know, this is a country that gives us enormous opportunity. I'm Exhibit A of that. I started out life in an orphanage, and I'm here today talking to you as Secretary of Agriculture. This is truly a great country. We all understand that. So those of us who understand that there's a responsibility to give back. So the country's better off because there are more of those young people willing to give back. The rural communities are better off because they can support the small businesses that are a lifeblood and the small family farms that are the lifeblood of that small community. The family farm is better off because it can continue to be a family farm. And we're better off as a country because we have a more resilient system that offers opportunities, small, mid-sized, or large. So this family is an example of what can be and what should, in my view, what should be. So we're going to hear from panelists who will also engage in a number of different activities. I think we'll broaden our scope here. But as you think about Farm Bill conversations, as you think about all of this, just ask yourself, are you okay with losing 544,970 farms in a generation or two and losing 151 million acres of prime farmland? I'm not, and I hope you aren't either. All right, thank you.
Well, good morning, everyone. My name is Julie Lassa. I am the State Director for USDA Rural Development here in Wisconsin, and it is great to be here with the panelists today and with the Pagel family to hear more about Dairy Dreams and the work that's going on, as well as to be joined by Secretary Romansky as well as Secretary Vilsack. When Secretary Vilsack was talking up at the whiteboard, he was talking about my family. I grew up on a small dairy farm in central Wisconsin in Stevens Point. My mom milked the cows. My dad worked a swing shift factory job in order to make sure that the family could make ends meet and to provide health insurance for all of us. And that is why, programs like the ones that Secretary Vilsack talked about, and the partnership that we have with the state of Wisconsin, with DATCAP, and as well as businesses and communities all across the state, it's working together to help build thriving communities. And the programs that are talked about this morning are one of the ways that we're able to make a difference, a positive difference, to help individuals, families, businesses, and communities, especially those in rural areas, be able to prosper and thrive. Because that's where I grew up, that's where many of you grew up in this room, and why it's so important. And I am so pleased to be able to join you all of here today, and I am going to kick things off to JJ, if you want to talk more about the business and the project.
Yes, thank you very much. So we did take advantage of the F grant, and a big part of that is we put in a nutrient concentration system, which is just up the hill here. When we looked at getting into that grant or into that system, it was very overwhelming at first because there's a lot that goes into it, and there's a huge financial burden that you take on when you take on something like that. So being able to get the FPAP grant through USDA really gave us the ability to take on such a challenge. And our family's always been very excited and very progressive and very proactive. And sustainability is more than just a buzzword to our family. It's something we live through every single day. Like Secretary Vilsack said, you don't know a farmer that doesn't do a better job of taking care of our land, our air, our water than the previous generation did before them. We're always trying to do something better than the next generation, or than the generation before us, to leave it better for the next generation to come. So when we got, this was a very big deal for our families, that we were able to create a sustainable nutrient fertilizer line that not only could make it so we'd be more efficient, so we could actually put on the nutrient need of the crop, but also a revenue stream for our dairy. One other thing that we're also involved in, as Secretary Vilsack talked about earlier, is there's a Climate Smart program that is out there. And we have Pecos Ponderosa, Dairy Dreams, Coleman Ponderosa, and then Pecos Ponderosa Cropping are all part of this Climate Smart program. And this Climate Smart program talks about sustainability, but as we talked about before, like we've all heard about carbon sequestration, we've talked about carbon neutral, we've talked about net zero, and these are all things that were talked about. When we first put in our digester, we were told we were net zero, but at that point, we had no idea if we were or not, because we didn't have a baseline to measure off of, and we didn't know exactly what we were measuring. But getting into this, utilizing the Climate Smart Commodity Program, we were able to get into it, and basically what it is, it's a data collection system. So it's run through the COMET program, through Houston Engineering, and basically what they do, they look at a lot of things that you and I as farmers look at every single day. We look at, you know, our nutrient management plans, how we handle our crops, how we handle our fertilizers, our milk production, our herd sizes, the types of breed we have. We don't have anything as far as grazing goes, but that's one thing they look at. The rations by life stage. So if you got fresh cows, dry cows, you got your high groups, your low groups, it looks at your rations. The energy uses that you have on your farm, you know, are you using how much propane or natural gas, diesel fuel, electricity, how much you're going through there, and then if you're recycling any water. Another thing that it takes into accounting is, you know, how we work our fields. You know, what is your dirt diet? So what nutrients are you putting into the ground? Are you planting cover crops? Are you doing no-till, minimum till? What are your tillage practices? You know, if you're putting in fertilizer, what kind of fertilizer are you applying? Whether it be chemical, if you're putting on manure, the applications, the dates, the rates, you know, what kind of chemicals, and then how many passes you're doing if you are doing tillage, or if you're doing irrigation, and then harvest yields. How are we doing? You know, how are we doing on managing that ground? So through this program, we were able to take advantage of that, and we're hoping by July or August that we will have our carbon footprint score, so we'll at least have a baseline to see where we're at today, and then we can look at what different things we can do in the future to get better, to lower that score, because agriculture is one of the few places in the world that can actually have carbon sequestration. We have, like we said a lot earlier, we run a lot of the land, we have a lot of the forests, we have those types of things. So the forestry industry, agriculture, crop farmers, we're able to sequester carbon into the soils and keep it there. The other thing we look at is erosion. So very interesting thing I heard the other day from a friend of mine is that, you know, everybody looks at erosion as water, but nobody looks at it as wind. And through wind erosion, so 1 ton of dirt is basically this piece of paper here, the size of a piece of paper, that thickness is 1 ton of soil loss across an acre. So that's not a very lot. So when you're out there working dirt, those types of things, that is the soil loss that is coming off of your fields. And when you generate that and you put that into a mindset, when you look at how much just one thin piece of paper is, it really sets in. So looking at things like that, it really opens up your eyes to how we need to continue doing cover crops, working on our minimum till, and things that we can do to be carbon sequestration and, you know, get our farms to the point where, you know, we are carbon neutral, carbon sink, because out there, we are one of the few industries that are going to be able to do it. And our families had the ability, and we've been very lucky. We've been able to tour. We've been to Ireland and over to the Netherlands and over to Europe in the last couple of years. And when you go over there, that's all you hear about. Carbon, they all know their carbon footprint. They all have their carbon scores. So as the U.S. dairy farmer looks at a way that we can look to increase our exports to these other countries, knowing our carbon footprint, knowing our carbon score will get us there, because we are going to become the farmers, we are going to become the nation, we are going to be the country that these other countries want to work with. They're going to want to import our products because they're done the most sustainably, We already create the most healthiest and wholesome, nutritious products in the world. Now we can go and we can show them that we also do it in the most sustainable ways. Thank you.
Here we go. Hello, everyone. My name is Kylie Pagel, and I am the eldest of the 4th generation of the Pagel family. And as I sit here today, I would like to share my story with you guys. And how my story kind of goes is, as from my earliest memories growing up, it has been surrounded around agriculture and the dairy farming that my family's done. From waking up in the morning to meet mom and dad out in the barns to help them move cows, even though I was too small to actually do it myself, I always wanted to be around it. And growing up, I always knew that there was some place for me in the industry, and it just took a little bit for me to figure that way out. I've always had a passion for education, and it was educating what I knew and what I was seeing around me, and that was agriculture and the dairy industry. I'm a recent graduate from the University of Wisconsin, Green Bay, and in my last semester there, a lot of my classes were surrounded by the word sustainability. And what I got to do in those classes, in my discussion boards, was share our real-life journey that we are going through, working to be sustainable, and show that there are people out there doing it and that it wasn't a buzzword. Just as my dad said, it means more to us than the buzzword that people are calling it today. So I got to share those stories with them and educate them on what we were doing in real time to move forward to be more and more sustainable. I've been able to grow up and watch the farms grow as I grew up too. And I've watched as technology has grown and the different innovation that the agriculture industry has been surrounded around. And with that, I've been able to watch and grow my knowledge. And with that knowledge, I get to share that with not only our general community, but the communities across the United States. I recently ran for the Allison Dairyland title here in Wisconsin, and unfortunately I did not get that position, but I realized soon after, Alice is an advocate for agriculture and dairy in everybody's lives, but I don't need that title to be that advocate for everybody around me. I was able to see what we have here around us, and I get to share that story with everybody that I meet in my daily life. And I can keep doing more to advocate for agriculture and for the industry as a whole. And that's something that's been very important to me and something that's been very important to my family. I've seen how much education means over the generations, and that just pushes me more and more to continue to be better and continue to do more to educate those around us. And as my dad said, the generations that came before, we want to keep doing more to be better for the next generation and leave everything better than how we found it. And I think that's something that farmers have been doing our entire lives. We're stewards of the land, and I think we've always been sustainable, but now, as the word is coming around more and more, we get to showcase that and exactly what we are doing to make the world a better place. And I think that is something that is truly great. I'm honored to be the eldest of the next generation because I get to sit and work with my family every day, and I get to be a part of these conversations and what we're doing here, and get to be the next part of what's coming next, what's going to change, and I can keep bringing different ideas to that table and help my family grow in our sustainability initiative. Thank you all.
Hello, I am Claire Hedrick, and I represent the dairy goat industry here in Wisconsin, and it's a very exciting industry. We are in a growth phase, to say the least. Wisconsin leads the nation in the number of dairy goats, with Calumet County, which is just a neighboring county here, having the highest concentration of goats in the United States. My husband and I are founding members of the Quality Dairy Goat Cooperative of Wisconsin, which my husband is the manager. And that cooperative manages the milk from 100 family farms. As that cooperative supplies not only our LeClaire family creamery that my husband and I, along with 4 of our 5 adult children, co-founded, that milk is also supplied with 2 of our large partner farms. And this sets the stage for the the grant that we applied for because we now have that market in the area for the cull does, the buck kids. You have to do something. If you think about the dairy cow industry, the dairy goat industry follows that industry very closely. We since have formed what we call the Kid Farm on our original farm, and this farm is operated by our daughter, Anna, and basically what we do is we bring in buck kids at a week of age, and we sell them at 60 pounds, and those go to families and restaurants, and when our entity is full, we run about 2,500 babies at a time. And since we have that supply of the goats being readily available, what we had made a decision to do, because one of the folks that stopped out one day said, my grandfather appreciated harvesting the live animal. My father was okay with it, and I want to walk into the grocery store. And so with that being said, we're in that process with the grant that we applied and received is to bring the goat meat to the marketplace using our local processors in the area to minimize our carbon footprint. And in order, this grant has allowed us to develop our website, our branding, and our packaging. We hired a marketing firm because, if you stop and think about trying to get something into the marketplace and to be sustainable in that marketplace, because that's really what you want to be, to have that spot on that shelf for those few minutes really does nothing for the industry. So we have started Kalana Specialty Meats, and one of our biggest challenges is to find a processor to harvest the product and to make the product. And the challenge that we have is that they have to be federally inspected in order to take that product across the state lines. Our daughter Katie and her husband have purchased a meat market in St. Cloud, Wisconsin. This is a 100-year business. And with that being said, if you stop and think about with any business to start out something new, having those grants are so valuable because you're putting that money in the beginning when that cash flow is very limited. And you really have no control over your market on the end game, so that grant is really kind of the key. Well, it is the key there. And they applied for a number of state and federal grants, which they were able to receive. And this allowed them to update their facility. When you think about a Main Street market, meat market, many of them were built, like I said, this is a 100-year-old business, and so they were added on, and the efficiency is not there. So this mitigates some of the structural issues, and of course, focusing on food safety and efficiencies. And one of the exciting things, when you think about the grants that their family was able to receive, this allowed them to not only expand the production in the retail area, but within that small community, they were able to buy one of the vacant buildings, one of the 3 vacant buildings on Main Street. And this will become their retail space, so you're revitalizing that community. They have a garnering of many of their customers certainly come in on they're very, very dedicated to their business. And then they were able to add 3 full-time employees because of the grant. And then the other thing that is exciting is the fact that they were able to go federal. They're on a federal inspection now instead of state, so that allows it to go across state lines. And then if you remember, I was talking about our Kalana Specialty Meats, so now she is able to help our business grow because of that. And so it's kind of, the 2 grants have really worked back and forth, together. And they have, you had one of the questions that was asked, what can we do better? What are some of the things that perhaps we can take a look at? And one of their challenges is they have applied for a local MCAP grant last July. and they're still waiting to hear. They said that they're kind of in the pipeline, and when you're a small business and having to sit and wait because they're basically have moved up to those points, they've got their business right to that point where this last grant is that final, the piece that they need to move forward. One of the other challenges that we have faced in our goat meat business, if you understand, over 50% of the goat meat that is utilized here in the United States is imported. And it's imported at a cheaper price than what we can afford to produce it here. And so as a result, that is a challenge in our setting. A couple of other things, I'm really very thankful. I have been able to serve on the FSA State Committee, and from that bird's eye view of that committee, what I really see is the USDA truly stepping in and helping the farmer to keep them on the land, coming up with programs and ways of, shall I say, supporting so that can actually happen. The dairy goat industry obviously is a very niche market. We're definitely moving forward. We're definitely growing here within the state. And very, very thankful for the grants that we've been able to garner because of the fact this has allowed our industry to grow. And there's not a lot of readily available resources for us. If you think about the dairy cow industry, that's a whole different ballgame. And here, we're kind of looking at that. And so I would really like to thank, the other thing I'd like to really have folks think about is other ways of revitalizing our local communities, agritourism. I have the wonderful opportunity of handling the tours, the events at LeClaire, and I meet the consumer face-on nonstop. And they are really, really looking for experiences. They really want to meet the people that produce their product, and they really want to learn about that product because they just don't know, and they have no resources to learn from that. And so with that being said, I really feel that agritourism will bring vibrance back to many of our local communities also. And I'd like to thank Secretary Vilsack and Secretary Romansky for your commitment to our agricultural industry. Thank you.
So just really appreciate you raising the issue about the MCAP program. This is a program for very, very small processing operations. In order for us to be able to complete grants to recipients, they have to go through an environmental review. And our staffing is relatively limited because of budget constraints. So we are trying to get the environmental reviews done as quickly as we can. But when you look at all of the grants that we've recently created, that whiteboard, there are over 10,000 grants that are in that whiteboard, just to give you a sense of how many grants we've been churning out. But the good news is I think you'll see some activity there in the month of June and July.
All set. Well, good morning, everybody. Thanks for having us. Thanks, Pagel family, for hosting us at this great place and for your story, and also for the secretaries for coming out to the farms. It's great to see you. I know you got plenty to do, but to have you out here is really great. So I'm Joe Tamandel, Executive Director of Dairy Grazing Apprenticeship, and a beginning farmer like 25 years ago. So thanks to the USDA type of programs, after short careers of teaching, my wife and I were able to actually go and purchase it was actually a vacant 80-acre farm at the time. And through some help through EQIP and follow up with CSP, we're able to convert the dairy to a rotational grazing dairy and start off under our dream of owning our own dairy farm. Right now, our dairy profile looks like it's about 600 cows on 3 different dairies, and many of them, and through some of the other USDA and support, we're able to keep pushing out and building some infrastructure around these managed grazing systems. The idea about 3 of the dairies is because really when we look at this and we're ready to retire out of this farm, we want to be able to have 3 independent opportunities for businesses. Because, you know, like the Secretary, and many here, we're not interested and we're not okay with losing over 500,000 farmers. And so how can you increase the number of farms? Because, you know, the diversity of our landscape is a strength, you know, of our industry in general. We really need to be looking at these things. So thank you to the USDA for helping us get to that point. In light of, you know, creating more opportunities for beginning farmers, in about 12 years ago, we worked on creating the first apprenticeship program in the nation in agriculture underneath managed grazing dairy. And that was in thanks, again, USDA funding, and that was beginning farmer rancher development grants and some of the other support that came out that allowed us to do a full-blown DACM and create this program and spread it across the country. This program is now in 16 states, and it's got 200 and some farmers that are approved to become training sites through a paid registered workforce development type of a program. The more exciting thing now about that is it's still a challenge to stay on the dairies. And we do realize that it's going to take these other income streams, and we're going to have to really figure out what is the true value of diversification in our countryside and in our industry itself. So when the Climate Smart Commodities opportunity came out, that was spot on. And I give the administration a ton of credit for coming up and saying, let's put some seed money into our rural communities and let them take it. Let's build some things out that we don't need to keep supporting. So we were fortunate enough to be able to get a Climate Smart Commodities grant where we're really trying to measure, monitor, and verify the impact of these managed grazing type of systems. And so that we can plug those into market streams and add value onto our dairy farms and of these egg of the middle type of dairies on behalf of the dairy industry. Because if we can create that and we can really understand the impact and the value, we can plug that into, you know, value-added or commodity streams of milk. And I think that's going to help our whole profile all the way over, not only on a national basis, but an international trade type of a basis. So that's where we're sitting right now and some of the opportunities, and thanks to the USDA. One of the other really cool things, and I'll wrap up, but as we pulled out this Climate Smart Commodities work, and we're really looking at incentivizing and creating these market opportunities for the egg of the middle families in rural communities, we realized that there's a real appetite for it, and this is bigger than what we had even thought. So we just got done, which is pretty exciting, aligning a group of leaders out of the industry sector of the managed grazing value chain. Because when you create these commodities out of this capital, it really takes everybody in the value chain to come together. To be able to create those actual market systems. So we had some representatives into a facilitated group from finance, from production, education, support systems, measure, monitor, verification, and food traceability into dairy markets and environmental markets. And we had a robust facilitated 2 days of conversation with Forum for the Future. And coming out of that, we came out with much of almost a consensus that we almost need to create a trade alliance around this commodity climate smart practice. So this is the direction that this nonprofit that created the next generation of farmers is heading for, to really work on leveraging the values from USDA and the incentives from USDA, and to really create that and push it out into our rural communities for vitality. Thank you for that.
Hi, I'm Larry Dufek from Dairyland Farm, and I'd like to thank the USDA for something, planting the seeds through NRCS. As we come up here and watch all the cover crops, we're able to see those seeds grow and the results of those seeds growing, moving forward on water quality and sustainability. I'm also involved in a project with Agri-Energies. It started first at my kitchen table with my daughter that just graduated from high school, is going to college for accounting and sustainability, and I asked her, where should we invest in the future? And she said, let's invest in technology to help develop technology for sustainability, and that's what started my relationship with Agri-Energy, and we're in the process of producing diesel fuel and aviation fuel. And with the help of the USDA, trying to develop that technology for the next generation, because the next generation is so important. So planting those seeds for the next generation, hopefully we can enjoy watching those seeds grow on the dairy. So I appreciate that. The grant that I received, or will be using the excess heat from producing diesel fuel, as we want to become more sustainable, to reduce our energy costs to produce sustainable energy. So not only do we want to produce sustainable energy, we want to reduce the cost of what it does. And we just want to keep improving our carbon footprint, reducing it like the Bagel family businesses are, and trying to come up with new innovative ways, developing technology to reduce our carbon footprint, recycle our heat, recycle our nutrients, and just continue that life cycle. So that's basically it.
Larry, let me ask you a question on this. Yeah. How long did it take you to get from a concept to actually pulling the trigger and making the leap?
3 years, three and a half years. And it seems like a lot of concepts start with just talking, and then it starts developing, and you pull people together to try and accomplish a goal.
Who did you bring? Who did you bring to the table? What kind of people were you interested in visiting with?
We worked with the University of Oshkosh at a pilot program in the fuel industry, which was greatly supportive. Jaeger Energies, and just developed engineers and technical people, and they pulled all together to try and develop a concept to keep moving forward. So it was exciting, but yet challenging, and so that's what's really great about the money that you put forward to. You're planting the seeds, and these are hard steps to take, and hopefully it helps the industry and the community grow.
And what's the cover crop that you're using? What are you planting?
Triticale, rye, winter forage.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Thank you. I'm Kristen Runge. I'm from UW Extension at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, and I work with the Community Development Institute. So, and as an Extension employee, I'm always funded by USDA, so thank you very much for continuing to be a robust partner for Extension programs. But I'm here today because there are two programs that I want to talk about that are new and a result of the funding that we've been discussing today. And the first is the Wisconsin Rural Partnership Institute. This is a grant that the University of Wisconsin received that is allowing us to do research across a wide area or a wide number of projects that are relevant to our rural communities. When we learned we were going to receive this grant, we put out a bid to our faculty and staff who spoke with our partners in agriculture and in rural communities, and we funded a number of different projects that range everything from understanding water quality in the Central Sands and how critical that is to agriculture in that part of the state, to connecting cultural values and resilient food systems in our tribal communities, to supporting our need to adapt agriculture to our changing weather and the very interesting storms that we've been having lately. One of the things that I'm working on specifically is something called the Rural Livability Project. When you talk about diversifying income streams on farms, one of the things that we notice in all of our rural communities that we have significantly less diversity in our businesses across all of our communities. Every community in a rural setting used to have a grocery store. We used to have a local bank. We used to have all of these critical institutions that support healthy farms and support healthy rural living for both our businesses and also for us as individuals who live in rural communities. So we're doing a 2-year-long research project to understand what are the factors that have caused the decline of some of our rural institutions that we all rely on. How can we set up a framework to help them succeed in the future? And then using that data, how can we work with our partners through the USDA Rural Partners Network, through Wisconsin Economic Development Corporation's Office of Rural Prosperity, our regional planning commissions, and the folks that come out in our communities to make sure that we are creating a healthy environment for all of our rural communities and the farms that are being supported by those rural, and that those farms are supporting in those rural communities. So that network has been really important. The second project that I'm associated with but not directly working with or not directly employed is the Wisconsin Rural Partners Network, which was established by a USDA grant and has placed, I like to think of them as force multipliers, has placed USDA employees in rural communities across Wisconsin that have been often underserved and overlooked, and are active in helping those communities identify their economic development and community development issues, and then reach out to partners through University of Wisconsin Extension, through all of the other organizations that work with them, to address the issues that they're seeing, whether it is downtown development, whether it is workforce, whether it is increasing the numbers of trails that give people in communities access to their rural places. So those have been two really powerful programs that we've seen through this last couple of rounds of funding. You asked in the email what some of the challenges are that lie ahead. And I would say that part of the challenges that we see at Extension through the research we do and the community members that we talk to is providing a future for people like you, Kylie, and for people like you that are founding businesses or returning to communities after doing job training or elsewhere, undertaking entrepreneurial adventures. How can we provide rural communities that are vibrant, that have economic opportunity for all, that really maximize and leverage what we see happening here at Dairy Dreams and our other farms? How can we leverage that to create really vibrant places that are going to make great homes for us as rural residents, but also for the next generation, and also for the folks in our communities who are aging and would prefer to age in place and remain in community with access to health care and some of the other things we've talked about today. So that's what's going on with us at Extension, and thank you very much for the opportunity to be here today.
Great. We've heard examples today which USDA can be of help and assistance. I'd like to spend just a minute or two of your time just briefly talking about the Farm Bill and the process, as well as the current situation with H5N1, because I know that's of interest to the dairy industry in a very serious way. First of all, the Farm Bill, the House of Representatives Ag Committee is going to take up their version of the Farm Bill today in committee, and that's the beginning of the process. I think the challenge that we face in getting a Farm Bill done isn't so much figuring out what we need to do, it's figuring out how we pay for it. The Farm Bill is structured in a way where essentially you have a defined amount of money, which is called the baseline. The Congressional Budget Office basically provides you at the beginning of the process a baseline number. It's a number of the cost of a farm bill over a 10-year period. And the baseline number might be a very large number in the case of a farm bill, which it is. I think it's $1.1 trillion. So everything that has to be done in the various titles to the Farm Bill has to be done within that number. So if you want to increase some aspect of the Farm Bill, you've got to either figure out what you're going to decrease to pay for it, or you have to bring in and identify additional resources. I think there's a way forward. I think a creative utilization of some of the tools that we have at USDA will allow us, if we're practical and reasonable about what we can do with things like reference prices and things of that sort, we can get to yes. But obviously farm bills are never easy. It will take fits and starts, I'm sure. I think everyone's recognizing that Congress is under a timeline. They've extended the existing farm bill in September of last year so that they would avoid any problems with the programs. I don't think there's a desire to want to continue that process, so hopefully over the course of the next couple of months the House and Senate finds a way to get to yes. I have some concerns about limitations on the Commodity Credit Corporation that are being proposed because I think it does constrain the ability of a secretary to respond to things like H5N1, the high-path avian influenza, and the situation with fertilizer the resources, the funding of the Climate Smart Agriculture also came from the Commodity Credit Corporation. So it's a vehicle to be able to use to promote innovation, to promote market development, to respond to disasters, and to ensure that we're able to deal with animal health issues. So if it is constrained in some way, it may impact and affect our ability to do any or all of that. And so hopefully we will get those issues worked out, and folks will figure out creative ways to use the tools we have to meet the need based on what members of Congress have heard from all of you over the course of the last couple of years. On H5N1, continue to see it in 9 states. Fortunately, we haven't seen an expansion beyond the initial 9 states. There are roughly 51 or 52 herds that have been impacted and affected by this. There are a number of other mammals that we've seen a spread to. We're continuing to do testing. We continue to work with those herds to try to provide additional assistance to the producers. If they are faced with a loss of milk production, we're helping to pay and compensate for that loss of milk production. We're working to make sure that they are properly taking care of themselves, their families, and their workers in terms of adequate protection. Making sure that we continue to test before we move the cattle. So we do the best job we can to contain the virus on the farm and eventually have it work itself out. We're also working on a vaccine on both poultry and on bovine. The vaccine on poultry, I think, is progressing relatively well. The challenge there, though, is that there are trading implications in terms of the use of vaccinations that we need to work through. On the bovine side, we've just begun that process, and the challenge now is to find what is called a challenge a cow that basically has the virus that can be used to sort of test certain vaccines. We're going to try to create the right set of circumstances so we can begin testing proposed vaccines. Once we've identified a potential workable vaccine, then it's important to work with a commercial enterprise and encourage them to produce a significant quantity of it so that we are able to respond to the next outbreak. That can take it can take time, but we're working on it. So that's kind of the update on both of those circumstances. But we have a few minutes. Be happy to respond to questions or concerns if folks have any. Yeah, there's a question over here.
Hi, thank you so much for being here today. I actually am a child nutrition coordinator and the food service director for a school district. And listening to you speak today about how the rural farms don't get enough business made me really think about how we spend our dollars purchasing food for our school districts. Has the USDA ever considered cash in lieu of commodities so that we have more freedom to invest in more of our local farms?
Actually, Randy, why don't you?
Thank you. Great question, and we have done that. We've actually got a great partnership with USDA for farm to school programs, ways to connect young people to food that was probably produced right down the road. Why don't we connect those dots, shorten that chain, and feed kids healthy, nutritious, locally grown food? So we just received a grant from USDA and have turned that back out to partners in the state. And we hosted people from the Secretary's Regional Food Nutrition Services Office just this last week, took them around to schools that are doing this, connecting the dots. The other thing they're connecting kids to getting their hands in the soil and growing their own food. So you got kids growing healthy, nutritious food for their friends at the lunch table. And what happens then? Kids know where their food comes from. They also are willing to try more things. They're willing to eat things that they might not have eaten otherwise. So we're very appreciative of that as another example of a funding source that's come from our partners at the USDA that we've plugged it right back in. It helps that my boss has spent his career, educating and caring for young people, and what's best for our kids is what's best for our state.
Just a finer point on this. There were two efforts. One effort was to create local food purchasing agreements for schools and for so it's both the ability to purchase locally produced foods. Then we had a supply chain assistance program that provided additional resources for schools and food banks. Both of those were the supply chain was funded through the Commodity Credit Corporation, so it goes back to the whole idea of being careful how you regulate that program, which gets back to the Farm Bill discussion. And our hope is that by setting up these local and regional food purchasing agreements, that we create the knowledge and awareness of how to actually do this, so that the other resources that we use to procure for schools, USA Foods and all of that, can funnel a portion of those resources into this now more mature supply chain that we've helped to create. In addition, we've also provided the Secretary with additional resources that if you are going to create this supply chain, you're going to have warehousing, you're going to have cold storage, all of that. And so we've provided him some additional resources to begin making some grants to strengthen that supply chain. So we have started that process. I think we've got a ways to go. But we also had the Farm to School program where we provide grants to schools to allow them to better understand what's grown and raised around their school district and to create contracts with local producers so there's a direct relationship between school and producer. Sure.
Products that are given to us either brown box through the USDA or approved producers. So I guess what I'm asking more about is we have a really great system in place for Farm to School. We get as many local fruits and vegetables as we can. We are purchasing all local beef next year, but our funding is so limited that if we could get that, instead of the dollars from the USDA to use on approved USDA commodity chicken sources, for example, if I could pick a local farm to buy all my chicken from, I would be able to connect back to my community a little bit better than how we're doing it right now. Does that make sense?
It does, and that's the challenge there is an appropriations challenge. In terms of the resources we get directed as how we use them. We did in the new school meal rule did provide. We'll look for additional. Can't guarantee it, but we are very interested in doing this, as witnessed by the fact that we put millions, actually hundreds of millions of dollars into the system recently.
Hi, the coolest thing I'm going to do today is not hang out with the two secretaries. I'm hoping to be in the tractor in about a half hour or an hour, actually an hour and a half till I get home. Dan Meyer, lived down in Kiel, Wisconsin, about 60 miles south of here. No-till on 100% of the farm for over 10 years. My question or comment goes back to your comments on the Farm Bill and a little bit about trying to implement these programs. We're going to need to pass a new Farm Bill moving forward to make sure you have enough money appropriated for that staff that you need for that as well. Some great things that our farm benefited from the farm programs. Uncertainty moving forward until that passes. Farmers don't care if you're Republican or Democrat. They want to get things done. We don't have time to worry every year whether my conservation stewardship payments are coming because of farm plan. Also reference prices for milk. Our expenses have increased tremendously the last number of years. I want to say doubled. I don't think that'd be too big of a stretch to say that over the past several years. Also, growing grains, we are as efficient as we ever have been. We use about a quarter gallon per acre to plant our crops. That's where we're at right now. Some might be able to do it better, but much better than we did 20 years ago or more, where we crossed the field 5-6 times before we ever got the crop in the ground. So we need a farm bill. We need higher reference prices for our grains. How do we get it done? How do we put the politics aside and do the work for the farmers?
Well, I think it's, I would say, first and foremost, everybody being practical about actually what is doable. I think what you have now is a circumstance where in order to, let me explain it this way. The House bill that increases reference prices across the board and does it in a relatively generous way requires roughly $100 billion of additional revenue into the Farm Bill. Well, there isn't. So the question is, where does that come from? They have proposed reducing future nutrition benefits, which would save $27 billion. Of agriculture from utilizing the commodity, a portion of the Commodity Credit Corporation for things like the fertilizer program, basically not allowing a secretary that flexibility. Now, here's where the challenge comes. The Congressional Budget Office is an independent referee, and their job is to essentially figure out how much of a savings that restriction would generate towards that $100 billion need. And they came back and they said it will generate $8 billion of savings. But in order to do the Farm Bill the way folks in the House would like it to be done, they need $53 billion of savings. So they are essentially saying, well, let's just disregard what the Congressional Budget Office says, and let's just say it's going to save $53 billion. Well, that's a gimmick, and that's a challenge because it creates the possibility of increased spending above and beyond what's authorized. And that creates the challenge of getting a farm bill with sufficient votes through the process, because there will be people that say, well, I'm happy to vote for reference prices, but I want it to be real. I don't want it to be based on some phony math. So that's the challenge. Now, the Senate bill does contain increases for reference prices, but they're the resource basically closing a tax loophole or two, which will save billions of dollars that in turn can be used to do the reference prices. And there's already inherent in the 2018 Farm Bill an inflation factor for reference prices. So reference prices are going to go up under any circumstance, even if the Farm Bill remained the same, they're still going to go up. The question is, how much can they go up, and how do you afford it, and how do you actually justify explaining to folks how you raise the money within the Farm Bill to pay for it. So that's the challenge right now. And I think eventually they'll have to work it out, right? They're going to have to get in a room, and they're going to have to work it out for the very reason that you just stood up and said they need to get it done, because you need to know what the rules of the road are. You need to know what the game plan is going to be, so you, your banker, and all of the people that are involved in your operation can plan, right? I'm hopeful that it gets done, but we want to make sure that there's an easy way to do it and a hard way to do it, and if you're operating numbers that are hard to justify, it makes it a little bit harder. anybody disagrees with the need to do it. I think there's a disagreement on how much and where the money comes from. That's the problem right now. But I think there is a genuine desire to, and understanding it needs to get done. I mean, it should have been done 8 months ago.
We've got time for one more question after this one.
Well, we'll go over here this way. No, we'll do you and then.
Oh, thank you. Nancy Cavazangian. I'm a crop farmer in America's Dairyland, just south of here. I'm also SMART program, and I had a REAP grant that put a personal wind energy system on my farm. I love those programs. Thank you. Looking at the bioproducts program right now very intently because we sell a lot of our corn to ethanol plants. Why, when you announced the SAF procedures, did you not include manure? And I'm wondering if when you look at the GREET model, you will consider manure and as a great fertilizer. We heard a lot about fertilizer today. I can get a lot of it from my dairy farmer neighbors. We know that it's really good for the soil. It does a lot of things that those other fertilizers maybe don't do. And there's some concern that you have to have nitrogen stabilizer on your nitrogen, which, okay, I get that. But why are we not endorsing manure as a great climate-smart commodity?
Thanks for the question. So a little bit of background. When Congress basically passed legislation directing the development of sustainable aviation fuel, Congress identified only a single model that the Treasury Department was to use to determine whether or not a particular production method would qualify for the tax credit. So the first order of business was for us at USDA to encourage Treasury to extend beyond the model that was specified by Congress to include the GREET model, because the GREET model was not in the legislation. So that was the first battle that we had to fight. And we fought that, and we won, and we got the GREET model in, and we also got adjustments to the GREET model based on what you all are actually doing out on the farm. Now, this may come as a shock to everybody here, but not everybody knows what you all do. And some people have this belief that you're doing what you did 20 years ago and that you haven't really changed much. And so we have an education process that we go through with our friends and some of the other agencies about, hey, that's not what farming is. That may be what farming was, but it's not what farming is today. Farming's changed. Farmers are doing a lot of interesting things on the farm, and you need to be aware of it, and you need to give them credit for it. So essentially, like the land use changes that were incorporated were actually, I think, probably better than most farmers thought would be the case, because we made the case that things have changed on the farm. All right. So first order of business. Second order of business was there are two tax credits. There's the 40B tax credit and there's a 45Z tax credit. The 45B tax credit is just for sustainable aviation fuel that is produced in 2023 and 2024. There is hardly any sustainable aviation fuel being produced today. It's about, really, there's a facility down in, LanzaJet facility down in Georgia. They produce maybe 8 million gallons. It's a really, really, really small number. So this 40B credit doesn't really do much because there's hardly any ethanol being, or any SAF being produced. So the goal here for that was simply to make sure that the message was sent that future credits would include sustainable practices on the farm, climate smart practices on the farm. Now, with reference to 45Z, we are engaged right now in a process at USDA to identify expanded numbers of crops and practices that will be capable of actually quantifying and measuring the sustainable capacity of a particular crop and a particular practice. And to the extent that we're able to do that, we're going to be able to add to and expand significantly the number of commodities that will qualify as a feedstock for sustainable aviation fuel under 45Z, and the number of practices. So the next 4 or 5 months, that's what we're going to be working on. So whether it's manure or whether it's other practices or whether it's single practices or groups of practices, to the extent that we can accurately measure and quantify and verify the result, then we're going to make the pitch through a rulemaking process that they should be included in the Treasury guidance for 45Z. So that's kind of the work that's going to get done. So more to come, and clearly we're going to try to be as expansive as we can, because we want that produced as we possibly because we would like to be not just a producer here in the U.S., but we think there's also an export market opportunity from this as well. And clearly it's a tremendous boon to farming in all parts of the country, really, because there are many, many feedstocks that could potentially be used.
I'm Larry Hedrick, and what I wanted to bring up, in addition to the things we do through our family and our family businesses, I'm also privileged to be the manager of Quality Dairy Goat Co-op. Thank USDA. Small grant when we began about 25 years ago with 6 farms to write up the different things we needed, get legal to get going. Like Clara said, we're now up to over 100 farms. And that was through USDA, so you've created a sustainable entity there. I'm also very privileged this year to be president of American Cheese Society, which represent the small cheesemakers, mid-sized cheesemakers throughout the United States. The avian flu is a huge impact to a lot of people. Please keep up all the research you can. It's easy when they put out in the headlines, just pasteurize and everything's good. A lot of our cheesemakers are not set up to do that. They are keeping the milk moving from small family farms. We need to keep that research going, and I know it is in the works now, for what the raw products are doing, what can they do to mitigate any issues there, if there are any. The big thing is we're learning as we go with this, but thank you for what USDA is doing for us.
Yeah, there are 3 aspects of this. I mean, the first aspect is biosecurity on the farm, and we've tried to provide additional guidance. We've tried to provide additional resources to enable facilities, particularly those that have been impacted and affected by this, to shore up their biosecurity protocols, make sure that they're doing everything they possibly can to prevent, if they are hit with this, the spread of it. That's the first. The second piece of it is vaccines, trying to figure out ways in which we can eventually potentially eradicate the threat. Just to go into a little more detail on the trade issue, right now there is the belief that vaccinated poultry, for example, would find a very hard market internationally. In other words, folks would not be willing to purchase birds that have been vaccinated. So we have to have a conversation internationally, globally, about that, whether or not that makes sense under the circumstances. You might ask the question, why is it so hard to get a vaccine? Well, first of all, you have to match the vaccine to the virus, and the virus is constantly changing. So you have to have a vaccine base that allows you to be able to change it as the virus mutates. That's number 1. Number 2, you have to figure out a way in which you can distinguish between a bird that's been vaccinated and a bird that's sick, or a cow that's been vaccinated and a cow that's sick. Right now we don't have that ability to create the marker that would allow you to say, oh, that's a vaccinated bird, that's a sick bird. 3, right now the vaccines that we've developed probably require 2 doses, and it's just not practical that you're going to poke chickens, that many chickens, twice, right? That's just labor. I mean, so you have to figure out a way to deliver the vaccine, aerosol or through feed, through water, some way for the vaccine to be delivered in a more efficient way. And then if you figure all of that out, you then have to encourage a commercial operation to produce the vaccine, which they are willing to do if they feel there's a market for it, but not obviously willing to do if there's no market for it. So in essence, we have to create the market. We, meaning the government, has to create the market. Gets back to the CCC and the ability to use the flexibility of that CCC to fund the capacity to do the vaccine banks that are necessary to produce the economic incentive for folks to get into business. And so there are all of those issues. And then on the bovine side, there's an issue of being able to create the sort of the challenge, the baseline situation with the virus that you can begin actually testing specific vaccines against it. We haven't quite got that figured out yet. We're working on it. And we have quite a few scientists across USDA working on it. And I appreciate your comment about research. I think this is really important, so I'm going to spend a few minutes of your time so you all understand the federal budget. Okay? If you think of the federal budget as a big, huge funnel, and you want to be at the top of the funnel, right? Because that's where the most money is available. So what department of government do you think is at the top of the funnel? Come on, these are smart people. Defense, exactly. All right, defense takes half. So the funnel now is half the size. Now, what do you... Like, huh? Health and services. How about our veterans? Got to take care of them, right? How about Homeland Security? All right. You know where agriculture is? It's in that very tight area, all right? So that's a challenge. Then the ag budget is a funnel because you got research and Forest Service and nutrition and FSA and RD and food safety and all. So part of our budget has a food program called the Women, Infant, Children Program. It's a WIC program. It's a very popular program. It's a terrific program. Helps pregnant women, babies, children under the age of 6. You never know for sure how many people are participating in that program, so you kind of have to guess what you need to be able to fund it. And farmers benefit from the program because it basically provides resources to those individuals to be able to purchase more milk, more cheese, more fruits, vegetables, and things of that nature. Well, it's a discretionary program, so it comes off the sort of it's almost always funded at its full level. So if it goes up, and Congress basically tells us that we actually have to have a reduced budget, and we have to basically find the money for pay increases within the budget. So, and they pass the budget late, as they often do. It creates a real challenge because that WIC program takes a lot of money out of the program. It's about a $25 billion budget, and WIC can be $7 billion. And then the Forest Service, you've got to fight the fires, right? You've got to fight the fires. Can't let them burn. So that's like billions of dollars. And so the funnel comes down. So where do you think research is? So the challenge is that folks don't see that research in the same way that they see healthcare research. Because healthcare research gets billions of dollars. National Institute of Health, billions of dollars. We get hundreds of millions of dollars, which is a lot of money, but given the need for research, it doesn't take much for hundreds of millions of dollars to be spent in research. So I think as we begin to see the connection between animal health and human health, the COVID experience we all went through, the H5N1 experience we're going through now, reinforces that connection. I think there's a growing understanding of maybe we got to get more serious about animal health and plant health. And I'm hopeful that that ultimately translates into greater support for more research. But when you understand the funnel system, it gets tough. And at some point in time, I asked my staff when I got back to this job, I said, how much has the non-defense discretionary budget overall increased in the last 10 years? And they came back and they said 28%. I said, well, how much is the USDA budget increased in that same time frame? They said 14%. Now, I'm not great in math. I'm good enough to know that if the average is 28 and I only got 14, somebody got more than 28. And so that's the challenge that we have. And I tell you, our team, the people that work for USDA do, you would expect me to say this, but I genuinely mean this. They do a remarkable job. They do a remarkable job. They are really, really dedicated people with tight budgets. We'd love to do more. And we're doing the best we can with the resources we have. But until that WIC program becomes a mandatory program so that you don't have to include it in your discretionary budget, and the reason it would be a mandatory program is it's very similar to the SNAP program, because you don't know how many people are involved in SNAP. It's whatever the number is, that's what we pay for. If you were to shift WIC into a mandatory side, then it wouldn't be competing with all the interests that farm loans, rural development efforts, food safety, etc., research. But right now it does. So it's a challenge. Well, let me just express my appreciation again to Pagel family for giving us this opportunity and for letting us see a bit of the future here in Wisconsin. Thank you all for being here, and really appreciate the panelists and their insights. Taking a lot of notes and got a few to-dos on the list by virtue of this meeting today. Again, appreciate the opportunity to come back to the largest cheese-producing state in the country, the cheese capital of the United States. I can tell you the reason you are is because of me. I am a huge consumer of cheese. I love it. There's not a time I go to the grocery store where I don't put a pound or two in there. Speaking of cheese, there's a cheese gifts for everybody. So terrific.